And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hi there, I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist Peter Chan, and this is your Alaska Aviation Weather Outlook on Tuesday, September 16th, 2025. And looking at how things are going to shape up here through the midweek. As of this Tuesday late morning, we're watching another compact and strong low lift out of the North Pacific, and it's going to ride up to the north and west out through this area of the eastern northeastern Gulf, and it's going to have gale force winds with some gusts to storm force, especially along the outer coastal areas of the Panhandle up toward Yakutat as we get into later this Tuesday night and during the day Wednesday. It's also going to have some moderate to heavier rainfall, especially from around Port Alexander, Sitka, all the way back up through Yakutat as we move through the day, pre-dawn hours of Wednesday morning and into Wednesday evening. And as of Wednesday morning, there could be a few low-top thunderstorms out over the northeastern Gulf in association with this low and the front that'll rotate back to the north and west. Meanwhile, IFR conditions expected Wednesday morning along the Beaufort Sea coast, areas of the North Slope, especially as you get past to the north there of Adigan and Anatuvik passes. And then we have another low out here in the lower Bering and a frontal system arcing ahead of it. So we have some IFR conditions extending up into the lower Alaska Peninsula and back through the central Aleutians, along with breezy conditions there. Wednesday afternoon, IFR conditions, southern Panhandle, especially around Ketchikan, Hyder, also up there in the north, Haines and up toward Yakutat and the northeastern Gulf Coast. We have IFR conditions across much of the North Slope and Beaufort Sea coast, including Utqiagvik. And then we have, again, along this area of low pressure and frontal system, IFR conditions, lower Bering Sea down across the central eastern Aleutians. And then for Thursday morning, the low pressure over the Gulf will be on the weakening trend, and still some MVFR conditions are expected here along the northern Gulf Coast. Widespread IFR conditions, though, along the spine of the Brooks Range and across the North Slope and Arctic coast. And then we still have some areas of IFR from the Pribilov, St. Paul, back through the lower central Bering and into the central Aleutians. And then on Thursday afternoon, some of that energy from the initial low here in the lower Bering is going to develop a secondary low, and some of that is going to lift northeastward up into the Gulf. So there's going to be more action along the Gulf Coast here to close out the week. The next system coming northward will have IFR conditions approaching the lower Gulf, with even the potential for a few low-top thunderstorms associated with that front. And then we could see Thursday afternoon areas of lingering IFR along the inner coastal mountains, especially British Columbia on up toward Chilkoot and White Passes. And we still have IFR conditions along the spine of the Brooks Range, North Slope, and along the Arctic coast. So past conditions for Wednesday, Anatuvik Pass there in the east central Brooks Range. VFR conditions early becoming MVFR. Better flight conditions as you go south. As you go north, you pop over into the North Slope, you're going to see MVFR become IFR. Same thing, Adigan Pass, VFR conditions early becoming MVFR, but if you fly northward, MVFR will become IFR along and north of the north entrance as you get out there over the North Slope. Lake Clark, Merrill, generally VFR conditions expected across much of the Alaska Range, south central. This will be the better day of the week and the next several. Rainy Pass VFR, as will Windy Pass MVFR, maybe a little bit there in the morning becoming VFR. Isabel Pass will be VFR, as will Mentasta Pass as you go along the eastern Alaska Range. Dropping down through the Copper River Basin, Tanita Pass may have some MVFR conditions early in the day Wednesday, becoming VFR. And then out over Portage Pass, MVFR conditions becoming VFR as the day wears on. And finally there in the northern Panhandle, MVFR conditions will become IFR on Wednesday as that frontal boundary and moisture increases from the south and southeast. So on the map that shows freezing levels, the surface freezing line is generally out there in the Arctic Ocean along the Chukchi Beaufort Sea off of Utqiagvik. And then obviously in the higher elevations and the colder valleys along the Brooks Range, North Slope, and into the Alaska Range, these areas could have some temperatures below freezing at the surface in the morning. But generally speaking, freezing levels aloft are still over 6,000 feet along the southeastern half of the mainland, a little colder there out over the Copper River Basin. But there is quite a warm ridge of warm air out here over western central Canada, and it's retreated at least from the panhandle, but a little bit of that's being pulled northward at the surface with the low pressure that's going to be coming up here toward Yakutat, Cape Suckling. Now this area out here is a reflection of the low that's out over the lower Bering just north of the Aleutians, and the frontal system arcing southeastward. Ahead of it, we find freezing levels rising 10,000 feet over the eastern Aleutians. So as far as where we do have some areas of moisture, thicker cloud cover, precipitation, we expect some moderate icing above 12,000 feet here over the northern Gulf, including the area around Yakutat. There's also going to be some moisture streaming northward that kind of pulls back along the Alcan border and into the eastern mainland. But the icing should be above 8,000 feet or so there. And then back here to the west, lower Bering out into the central Aleutians, we're looking at the potential for some moderate icing above 10 and 12,000 feet on Wednesday. The upper level wind field, the jet stream level 30,000 feet. We have kind of the trough axis extending here up through the panhandle. Ahead of it, 100 knot southwesterly jet max, south-southwest flow. And then out here over just to the southeast of the eastern Aleutians and south of the Alaska Peninsula, 105 knot jet max. And then behind me, stronger jet max of 125 knots. That's northwesterly pulling away from the Aleutians. And as we bring it down to 9,000 feet, 700 millibars, we have a general troughiness over the center circulation kind of here out over the northwestern Gulf. A broader belt of winds coming onshore through the northern panhandle up into the lower Yukon, Northwest Territories, anywhere from 40 to as high as 50, 60 knots from the southwest. And then as we go back south and southwest of the Gulf, generally 40, 45 knot westerly flow. And then behind me, here we have the low circulation here just on the north side of the western Aleutians and central Aleutians. So we have the strongest wind field, 50 to 60 knots down there out across the North Pacific. And then finally at 3,000 feet, the low that's up here in the Gulf, the northeast end, is compact. And it's going to have at 3,000 feet some winds, 250 knot storm force winds, along with that frontal boundary that rotates back to the north and west. Another area we have is up here off the Lisburn Peninsula, maybe about 30 knots or so. That'll create a little bit of turbulence off of the Lisburn Peninsula on Wednesday. And then out here through the Aleutians, just south of the western Aleutians, we have a wind field of 40, 50 knots. And extending eastward winds could be up there around 30, 35 knots at 3,000 feet. So that translates for turbulence threat and the central western Aleutians on Wednesday, surface to 4,000 feet. There could be some moderate turbulence there, a little pocket of moderate to isolated moderate turbulence off the Lisburn Peninsula on Wednesday, surface to 4,000 feet. And then as I step out of the way here, the main area of concern with that compact low and the strong wind field that's going to be rotating, especially along the outer coast of the Panhandle up to Yakutat, we do expect moderate to even some isolated severe turbulence out here over the northeastern Gulf along the immediate coast. Surface to 6,000 feet, and you're also going to have the threat of low-level wind shear on Wednesday in association with that frontal boundary and the strong, tight circulation around that area of low pressure in the northeastern Gulf.